What's going on, everybody? It's Brian Trippe. Welcome to another episode of the REI Live podcast. We are real estate investing live. We interview the very best real estate investors, entrepreneurs all throughout this great country of ours. Today is no different. From Indianapolis, Indiana, we have Jason Lucchesi with us. How's it going today, Jason?
Hey, how's it going, Brian, man? Thanks for having me on the show. Super excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. We're interviewing someone from my home state of Indiana, and we were just talking basketball offline, even though fifth and third graders, but still talking basketball is kind of getting me juiced up and getting me fired up right now for basketball season. Just kind of tipped off for college. So glad you're on the show, Jason. I don't know a whole lot about you, and neither probably does our audience. So I want you to just kind of start off right off the bat. Tell everybody who you are and what you do in real estate.
Yeah, man. So just to make a long story short, I got into the mortgage business back in 2002. I had really no intentions of going to college, mainly because my grades were awful, and it was going to be a challenge just to get into community college. So I started off in the mortgage business, got to see a lot of the side that a lot of people don't get to see, and that was what happened and caused from 2008. I worked with Countrywide Home Loans for a long time, all the way up until 2008, worked my way up the ladder and saw the writing on the wall. We sold to Bank of America. They let everybody go. And in 2008, I started my business full time. I didn't know what to do. I was watching webinar after webinar after webinar. I spent probably $40,000 that I didn't have on credit cards, and bought several different training programs. And I remember sitting on my floor in my office with all the programs wrapped up still, and I'm like, I don't even know what to do. So at that time, I was able to hook up with a mentor and started doing short sales. We got heavily involved with short sales, and I felt like that was the best thing for me at that time. I understood mortgages. I understood why the things that did happen and transpired did. So I started doing the short sales. And once that kind of fell off, I started getting into direct assets, where I would work with banks, I would work with hedge funds, and we would be able to work directly with sources that could give us off-market properties. And I've been doing that ever since. We do primarily a ton of wholesaling, not so much rehabbing anymore as we used to. We still do rehabbing, and then I am building long-term wealth as well within our own portfolio.
That's awesome. I want to talk about some stuff. I took some notes. I want to talk about some stuff that you mentioned, and we were talking offline about, and you just mentioned it there, about banks and hedge funds. It sounds to me like you said you started that way, but you also told me offline that you're still doing that. You're still getting deals from banks and hedge funds. And I want to talk about that on the show. I also want to talk about the Indianapolis market. From my eyes, from the outside looking in, Indianapolis seems to me like it is a cash flowing market, similar to what Birmingham is. I know a lot obviously about Birmingham, but Indianapolis, I know there are a lot of guys going there for cash flow. I know of a couple of turnkey operators in Indianapolis. So I want to talk about the Indianapolis market. I think it is very important. We've talked about the Charlotte market on here. We've talked about, Sarasota. We've talked about Columbia, South Carolina. We're talking a lot about different markets all throughout the country, and that's why we're Real Estate Investing Live. We're talking about all these different markets, and I think it's important. So we're gonna touch on that as well. But the first thing I want to ask you though is about how you kind of got started, because I think there are a lot of people out there that get started either the same way, or they think that that's the only way to get started is to go buy a bunch of programs and buy a bunch of just guru stuff.
Yeah,
Talk about that for a second. Like, talk about how that actually happened. Like, did you go to a seminar? Like, how did you get involved in that world?
It was a crazy time. To be honest with you, I had no idea what I was going to do. I just got married. My wife was pregnant with our firstborn child. I knew that I was leaving Countrywide, and when I left, I was investing pretty much 40% of my checks into Countrywide stock, and it went from $43 to $12 overnight. So I pretty much lost all of my money. And then when we came back here, a lot of it was moved for moving expenses and getting started. And I always tell people this, my back was not up against the wall. I was literally in the drywall. I was in the drywall, and I had no idea. My wife and I invested money into learning how to do stock trading. I didn't like that. Actually lost money. And then I was like, I saw one of these flipping shows, and I'm like, if that dude can do it, I can too. And I realized it was much harder than it looks on the TV shows. And I needed to make something happen. I didn't want to go and work for somebody else. I didn't want that anymore because I felt like it was draining me from a life standpoint, and I just felt like I needed to do this. And I set off a plan. I put a vision board in front of me that I saw every single day. I had only a plan A. I didn't have a plan B. I was going to go at this full force. If something was going to break down, I was going to fix it. I don't like to say the term fake it till you make it. I like to say believe it until you achieve it, because you have to believe in yourself if you want to achieve the results that you want in life. And my first closing couldn't have happened at a better time. I had like $1,500 left in the bank account. I was living on unemployment check to unemployment check, and I closed my first deal without me having to be there. It was a short sale. We made a little over $26,000 on it, net profit to me. And it literally, when I heard that the closing went through and it all went through, I felt like a gigantic weight lifted off of my shoulder because I realized this real estate thing was actually real.
Totally. Yeah, that first deal is always the one that makes the thing real. I mean, it totally did the same thing for me. So you were looking at different stock programs, you were looking at real estate programs. Just go back to that, it sounds like that was about 10 years ago. Go back to those emotions. What was that like for you?
There was tons of anxiety, nervousness, definitely being scared. I had no idea what was going to happen. I have this child on the way, and here I am feeling like a loser because I have barely no money to my name. When I had the $1,500 in my account, that was probably the highest it had been within 6 months. I remember at times I would take real estate agents out, and I wouldn't know if my card would be approved. I didn't know sometimes if dinner for the family or groceries would go through. It was on unemployment check to unemployment check at that time. And I didn't want to go work for anybody else. I actually did end up going back to somebody, and I wasn't focused. I was in a cubicle, and I was just like, I don't want this. I was being micromanaged. Here I am, I'm a grown man. I don't need somebody standing and looking over my shoulder. So they ended up firing me because they saw that I was, trying to do other things. It was a blessing in disguise because ever since then, that was my last job. And that was, over 10 years ago. But it was tons of tension, anxiety, lots of pressure. There was a lot of emotions going on. It was a scary, scary time. And it was one of the worst times in U.S. economic history, right. Especially for somebody like me. I didn't have a college degree, and I just left a company that I was the top 5 producing loan officer for 4 years straight, and I couldn't get a job anywhere. It was awful times.
So, Jason, the reason I ask you that is because I think that there are people that listen to this show who want to get into real estate, and they probably feel the same anxiety, and they're probably a lot safer than what you just described you were, even though your back was, you said it wasn't even against the wall. You were like in the wall.
Right.
It was that far up against the wall. I just want you to talk to that person for a second, because we do get so many people who listen to this show and you know it because I know that you coach as well where you are, and I'm sure you see this as well, that people want to do real estate really badly, and they have that fear, they have that anxiety. What set you apart was the fact that you went out there and you took action. Just talk to that person for a second who is just scared to take the action and just doesn't really know what to do.
Yeah, when I finally decided, to pick one program, I went through it as quickly as possible, because so many people, they take the education side to the max, and they don't use enough application. And I literally, I went through it as quickly as possible so that I could go out there and start making it happen, because I needed to do it, because there was nothing coming in. Nothing was coming in. I think the people that always see something from a success standpoint, they have to really, really, really want it. And something has to be sparking them to want to go there. Maybe a family member or a friend died, and, it sparks them. Or maybe they're realizing life is actually extremely short on this planet, on Earth. And are you going to spend it working for somebody else 8 to 10 hours a day, and you barely get to see your family, you barely have freedom? It really boils down to, do you really want it? And some people might just want it. And then there's some people that really want it. Unfortunately, people really like that security blanket, and they like working for somebody because they like, receiving that paycheck. Well, I could tell you right now, I wanted to work at Countrywide for 20, 30 years. I wanted to be there for 20, 30 years, but the rug was pulled out from underneath me. I had no control over it. Right. Being a business owner now, I have control of what happens. The market's correcting. I can control how to adapt to that. If the market's great, the market's bad, I control what I can do within my business to have it generate money. And, Brian, you bring up a point that's, a lot of people really don't touch. And I think it's really important. And I'm glad you brought that up, because you can't just want it a little bit. You either have to be 100% or 0%. There's no in between.
Totally. No, I agree. I totally agree. I want to jump into short sales.
Yeah.
Because we haven't talked about short sales on the show ever. This is episode number 109, and we've never talked about short sales. Because the reason we've never talked about short sales is because I think the perception is this is not the right time to do short sales. And we'll talk about that in a second. But 2008, you got in the business in 2008. When you said that, I was just like, well, that was probably like a really bad decision. But unless you were doing a strategy like short sales, obviously you had a really good mentor that knew, like you just got done saying, if the market's correcting, I can control how I adapt to that. I'm sure the mentor you had was adapting to the market conditions. Talk about short sales for a second, and then you're buying from banks, you're buying from hedge funds. Talk about that 2008. Don't talk about that today yet, but talk about what that was like when you were first getting started.
It was both exciting and scary at the same time, because I had confidence in myself that if I was just given an opportunity to at least get a deal, I was going to make it happen. And what I was doing at that time is I was going down to the clerk's office and taking a look at recently filed notice of defaults, or Liz Pendens, as some people might know them. And that's where somebody that's behind, 3-4 months on their mortgage, it could be filed from the bank to have a foreclosure judgment pinned up against the homeowner. So I would find these files and I would go door knocking. I didn't have a whole bunch of money, so I would plan out routes that would fit, from an economical standpoint, from me being able to capture as much mileage per gallon as I could with gas. So I would go and door knock folks, and I would have to sit and look at these folks. And this is what I wanted to do. And a lot of these folks would be in tears. They would have no idea what to do. At that time, even nowadays still, loan modifications aren't working. They just aren't. And people would be promised that they would be able to get a loan modification or a principal loan reduction. Principal loan reduction meaning that some of the balance would be taken off because the house was so underwater. And none of that stuff was becoming true. And what most homeowners didn't know is while the banks were trying to get them approved for that type of stuff, the foreclosure was still proceeding. So we would give them another option. We would explain to them what's going to happen if it does go into foreclosure, and what happens if we were going to do a short sale on the home, and how it would allow them to get their life back on track, because nothing was happening from even a state or federal level to help these folks out, because nobody was prepared for it. Nobody was prepared for it. Homeowners facing the types of problems that they were. I believe there was like 4 million people lost their homes due to foreclosures from like '08 until 2011. It was pretty dramatic for our country.
So let's talk about short sales. I want you to define it.
Sure.
I don't want to assume everybody knows what it is. We'll talk about what is a short sale. And I'm under the impression that short sales just aren't a strategy that's conducive to market conditions today. Tell me I'm wrong, and tell me why I'm wrong.
Sure. So what a short sale is I'll give you an example. Say somebody owes $200,000 on their mortgage, and let's just say it's worth actually like maybe $140,000. What we would do is we would come in, we'd have a licensed real estate agent come in, we would negotiate with the bank, and we would get an amount for less than what is owed. And typically, like, let's just, keep throwing in the example with that number. We would maybe get the house for $60,000, $70,000 and it's worth $140,000. And
why would a bank do that?
Well, most of the times they have no idea what they're going to do with that asset, even if it goes back to sheriff's sale and they get it back through auction. Most of the time it sits for a little bit of time before they give it to an agent. And most of the time when they have those types of negative assets on their balance sheet, it really affects their lending abilities. And banks aren't in the business of, holding properties. They're in the business of making money off of interest payments from loans that they've created to individuals like you and I, homeowners. And they do short sales so they could, first of all, they're already starting to collect from the risk that they've lost. So they are already writing off losses on the debt as they do the short sale. So we would pick it up for $60,000, $70,000, and they've already written off all of it. And plus they're getting, government assistance as well, as far as like bailout money. So at that point in time, even today, it's, they're still seeing that, it's better to do a short sale than it is to have to pay an agent, have to pay an attorney. And, with the market where it's headed, or, where they feel like it is, they don't want to sit on that thing for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, because lots of things are happening with vacant vampire properties, is what they're calling them, is they're being literally sucked with, potentially the sub pump goes out, and now you've got a flooded basement. If you're in the Midwest like here, there's basements. You could have vandalism. You could have, break-ins. You could have squatters. You could have lots of problems, and the banks don't want to have that, because then that's extra money that they have to pay for to fix the property. If somebody breaks a window or somebody comes in and rips out all the copper, there's several different components and risks that they don't want to take, and they would rather get rid of the asset as quickly as possible.
So what allows someone like you, how are you able to do short sales today?
It honestly, the numbers aren't as big as they used to be, but there still are homeowners that are facing they're facing problems with their mortgage payments, and a lot of it has to do with three things: it's car payments, student loan debt, and credit cards. We're at almost $4 trillion in consumer debt, and a lot of homeowners just aren't able to make those payments anymore. So what's happening is they'll always pay the mortgage first, but they need a car to get to work, to make a living. So most of the time, they'll sometimes let the car go first, but then they start thinking, oh, I can't do that. So they let the student loans go into default. They let the consumer credit card debts go into default. Next thing you know, they're at exuberant numbers and they can't make those payments anymore. So they start going into default on their mortgage. The numbers, like I said, aren't as like they used to be, but year over year, the numbers have gone up about 100%. So we were at 1.2% with filings across the state. We're now close to 2.2%.
What do you mean by that? 1.2% what?
Of homeowners going into default.
So, all right, I'm just going to tell you what's going on here, and I don't even know everything that's going on here. Just here's my experience with it. Yes, people are still going into foreclosure. Like I totally hear what you're saying there, and they're typically just losing their houses going to auction. And if it goes to auction, that's an REO, real estate owned. It goes back to the bank. When it goes back to the bank, what's happening in our area, what we're seeing a lot is that the banks know that we're in a hot market, and they're going ahead and they're cleaning them up and they're listing them. Yeah, and I'm not saying that's every case, but that's in a lot of cases, especially like the better areas. So that's why I asked you the question, how are you able to do so many short sales today? Are you not seeing that in your area where the banks are more likely, even though there is risk for them because they're not in the home ownership business, like you just said, but it's more likely for them to hold on to it and go ahead and list it because we are in a little bit hotter of a market than especially since 2008.
Yeah, it definitely is a really, really hot market, a market that we've probably never seen before in U.S. history. And, we don't do nearly as many short sales as we used to do back from 2008 to 2011. Those numbers definitely, we used to have 150 to 200 short sales in our pipeline at any given time. Those numbers aren't nearly anywhere where they are right now. But do I see them picking up? Possibly. With the debt that has been accumulated throughout the country, it can. We've seen the numbers year over year increase. But a lot of the banks just want to get rid of these. And if they are able to short it, they could short it and be able to walk away without having to have it go to an REO and then do the fix up, do the cleanup, list it with an agent, pay them 6% commission, because most of the time it is going to be 6% commission. Then they have to pay attorney's fees as well. So, most of the time they want to do a short sale if only the homeowner brings it up, because they are not going to bring it up. They hardly ever bring up that option. Most of the time it's either deed in lieu, to where they just sign a piece of paper and they give it to the bank, and then it's basically, that's called cash for keys. You're handing over your keys and saying, sayonara. But homeowners don't know how that affects them on a credit basis. It's basically the same way as a foreclosure. It's going to be on your credit for 7 years.
And a deed in lieu of foreclosure.
Deed in lieu of foreclosure.
And that's just giving up the deed to the bank instead of actually going through a foreclosure.
Absolutely. It basically operates, it affects the credit the same way almost as a bankruptcy does. Not quite as a foreclosure, but it's going to be on there for 7 years. It's going to be a tough time getting a rent. Insurance rates are going to go up quite a bit. It's going to be on there if your employer needs to pull credit. It's not good.
Jason, is this a strategy that because I know you coach people today, is this a strategy that you would steer people towards even today, or is it not really something that it's something you still do? It's just not a big percentage of what you do.
I do have students do it. We still do it to this day. I tell them this isn't going to be your number one lead source. This isn't going to be your primary thing. But there still are homeowners out there that have no idea of what to do. A lot of them are just leaving the house vacant, and banks don't know that. They just leave them vacant, and it's going to start getting really, really cold here. And now we're going to be talking busted pipes. It's not going to be good for the banks to just have these assets just sitting there when there's water in pipes, and when it gets below 30 and it starts getting freezing out, those pipes are going to burst. So that's a huge, huge expense that the banks definitely don't want to pay for. If a whole house has busted pipes, that's
Totally.
a few thousand, if not tens of thousands of dollars, depending on the house size.
So let's, and I'm sorry I'm harping so much on short sales.
Yeah,
I just think we just haven't talked about it. And
sure.
and the main reason we haven't talked about it is because I just don't know of anyone doing them. So
Sure.
today. So for someone who is either newer or someone that is just not done for or short sales, maybe been investing for a while, but just never done a short sale. Is it best to try to get a relationship with a realtor, or is it best to develop relationships with banks? You said you're getting them from banks before they're listed with realtors. What's the strategy there to actually get the deal? Is it to develop some sort of relationship, and with who and how?
So the two things is, when we're working with banks, it's already been foreclosed on. So we're getting to the banks when they have them as an REO. So it's already owned back by the bank, and we're getting them before they get listed with an agent. What'd you say?
How?
Okay. So the cool thing is, we use a website called BauerFinancial.com. It's BAUER financial.com, and we're able to find local mom and pop banks that are at a state and regional level. They're not like the big top 25 banks, because you're going to completely waste your time if you try and go to a Bank of America or a Chase or anything like that. But these local banks, and even some of the regional banks, they have assets on their books. Mm-hmm. And again, they have, sometimes they're like, man, we have this asset, what are we going to do with it? And a lot of times when we call them, it's not a huge amount, but if you have, 10, 12 banks that you're working with, you're going to get 1 to 2 deals that you could look at per month, and they're going to give you a really great discount on those properties before they go to an actual agent. Normally, some of the banks we work with, they work with me and potentially 1 or 2 other investors, and it's, first come, first serve. So it's a really, really great opportunity. So that's what we do. We use Bauer Financial, and we are able to find the banks. And then what we do from there is we find the banks on LinkedIn, and then we find employees that work at that bank, and we get in contact with, typically a C-level individual, like a vice president or higher, possibly somebody that's in control of asset management. And then that's how we're able to get in through there. Now, with short sales, yes, it's really key to work with an agent, especially if you aren't an agent yourself, because nowadays you need to have in order to be protected for yourself, because a lot of people were doing short sales wrong, and they were getting themselves into big trouble, especially without having proper language within their documents. You need to become a mortgage foreclosure consultant, which requires a surety bond from your state. So nowadays what we do is, if we get a deal, we just have our agent, our real estate agent, do all of the negotiations, all of the communications with the homeowner. We just put in our offer now and allow them to do it, because back then we did the negotiations. We would do everything with the homeowner, but it's just, you have to be safe. So if you are going to be talking to homeowners, make sure that you are letting them know you're a mortgage foreclosure consultant and you do have a surety bond.
So I want to make sure that we distinguish for the audience that's listening. You actually just talked about 2 separate strategies right there. Yeah. And I want to make sure that we're distinguishing the 2, because I actually just wrote here, not talking about short sales. Make sure you come back to short sales.
Sure.
The first thing you just said there, you weren't talking about short sales. You were talking about short sale happens before it would get foreclosed on.
Correct.
You were talking about an REO already been foreclosed on, already went back to the bank. You were talking about specific strategies to use to contact banks to try to get properties that are already on their books. And we already talked about this. You already said that they're not in the property business. They don't want the properties. So that's awesome. I love that, because I actually do that, but it's not a short sale. So come back to the short sales. And it's a great tip. And I hope you guys caught what Jason said. you don't go out there and try to work with the Wells Fargos, with the Bank of Americas. You're going to completely waste your time. We've done this successfully going into these smaller banks that are, like you said, local and regional type of banks where we asked to speak to the asset manager. Jason gave a good tip that we've never done before is jump on LinkedIn and try to find these people and communicate with the asset manager or the higher up people. That's a great tip. That's awesome. I love that, Jason. Now let's go back to short sales and talk about what you said. I heard you say it's best to work with an agent and instead of so this is what we tried to do in the past. I own a brokerage and our broker tried to do a couple of them for us. And it's just very hard to do a short sale today, I think. And we've never done one successfully. We've tried about 10 times. We're over 10. So give us some tips. So give us some tips on how do I go find a short sale agent that's not already working with because I'm sure there's 2, 3, 4, 5 flippers in your town that they know they're going to go right to those guys because they're going to buy them every time. How could a wholesaler, because I'm assuming you're wholesaling a lot of these, you said 70% of your business is wholesaling. How can a wholesaler get in good with these short sale agents?
So first of all, you have to be able to provide something for somebody else. The best thing that you could do is go get these leads for them. Put them on an Excel spreadsheet. Start calling them. If you go down to the county clerk's office, you could find out most of the time there's an online portal you can use. But the key thing is finding out all of the courts within that specific county, because there's going to be, even in some of our smaller counties, there's going to be 3 to 5 courts that file mortgage foreclosures. So you need to find out those courts, and then you could go online. You could start finding out the filings, get the information for the defendant and co-defendant, and then you could start doing a skip trace. 2 ways that I would recommend that you could do a skip trace in order to contact these people is needtoskip.com or fastpeoplesearch.com, which is fastpeoplesearch.com is free.
Let me jump in here real quick. So sure. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. When you say to go to the court system, I'm assuming you're talking about properties that are foreclosures have already been filed.
Yes.
The paperwork's been filed by the lending institution. It just hasn't gone to auction yet. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
So these are the ones you're trying to. These are your leads. This is
yes.
What you do? Okay.
Yeah, these are leads. These are folks that are going through a potential process. They might be going through a loan modification. Sometimes cases do get dismissed because the bank is able to work something out with them, but that's rare. A lot of times these loan modifications fall apart, and even if somebody does get a loan modification, the probability is about 80% that they'll go back into default. Mm-hmm. So it's a huge percentage. So what we do from there is we get the leads, we get them skip traced, we call them, find out if somebody's interested, and then we have our agents accompany us to the appointment.
That's awesome.
And then we have an offer right there. We have it available to give to them. And then we have our agents work with us in that case. And that's how working with agents is huge, because if you could offer them an opportunity to get more listings, and then you can instruct them on how to do this with a short sale. The key to having a successful short sale go through, it's all about the appraisal. And it's about the listing as well. So 2 things. The most important is the appraisal that the bank orders. They might order 2. The second component is the list price. You want to be extremely competitive on the list price. The first thing that I want to cover here real quick, Brian, is the agent that lists the property needs to be 100% aware when the bank's appraiser is coming out to appraise the property. Main reason why is they need to bring the purchase and sales agreement with. They need to explain what is going on, because 10 times out of 10, the appraiser has no idea. And also the appraiser is coming from a few counties away, and they may have no clue about that area. So if you could give them market statistics, market data, and the purchase and sales agreement, you could explain what's going on, it makes the world of difference.
So before you get to number 2, I want to make sure I understood number 1. So when you're going through the short sale process, the bank is going to get an independent appraisal done on the property, an as-is appraisal, I'm assuming. And you said that you want your agent to be there when the appraiser's there.
That is
Just to
correct.
make sure they give them the correct data and things like that. A lot of the appraisers I know are going to get offended if I try to data.
We do it in a way to where we're helping them and giving them we're just giving them information at that point. We talk to them. We say, hey, we just wanted to come by. We wanted to meet you here personally. This is what's going on with the property. There's no swaying. There's no persuading. You can't do that. That's obviously 100% illegal to do. We're just giving them information that they aren't aware of on the property, and the agent meets them there. That's the most important thing. And we also, all we're giving them is the purchase agreement, a current, just a printout of the current listing, just so they could see what it's currently listed at.
Okay.
And we just let them know of what's going on. So we're not trying to step on their toes or anything like that. Nothing like that.
Okay. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. The number one most important thing is make sure that you're there when the appraiser's there. And number two was make sure that they understand what the listing is, understand how much it's being listed for.
Yes.
I think it's important because I think we might have just skipped a couple of important things because I want to make sure that everybody's following along. We defined short sale. We went through the short sale process. I want to go through it one more time. The actual process. We find someone who's behind on their mortgage. Maybe the paperwork's already been filed, where the banks come in and they're foreclosing on a property, and they've already filed the paperwork with an attorney. Give us the next steps. What happens after that in a short sale scenario?
So before we even put an offer in on the property, it has to at least be listed. So once it gets listed, day one, we give our offer, and then there's
hold on.
Yes,
you're already. I feel like I'm confused because who? So I want to make sure. Just make sure everybody's following along. Who's listing it? How'd they get the listing? This is you got the lead and you gave it to your agent, and the agent went and negotiated something. They still have to negotiate something with the seller, right?
So it's a great question, and if I'm definitely causing confusion, I apologize about that. It is a confusing process.
It's way more me because we're jumping around, so I apologize.
No.
Around so much. I just want to make sure that we are covering this into because we've been talking about short sales, and it's important that we understand the entire process.
No, there's a ton of stuff. So let me back up. So either an agent has a short sale that they bring to us and say, hey, we need an offer on it. Or we find the deal from talking to the homeowner, and we're like, hey, Mr. Agent, can you come and meet with us so we can get this listing for you? So it's typically one of those two ways. An agent gets a referral from somebody they know, or we have it and we're giving it to the agent so that they can list it.
I think the confusion was the seller still has to agree to list it, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Even though they're getting foreclosed on, they still have to agree to list it. Okay. I think
they have to agree to all that. They have to, they really don't have any say on the purchase price. They just have to agree that they want to list it, and they also want to sell it to us per the purchase and sales agreement.
So you're going to get a listing and then get a sales agreement almost at the same time.
Correct.
Okay.
So
once that happens, now I understand you're going to go through the process with the bank itself and just, tell them, hey, we want to go through a short sale. They're going to send you a packet. You got to fill out the packet. The agent does. And then that's when the appraiser comes in, and you're just making sure you're giving the appraiser, they know that it's a short sale. They know that there's a contract on it that's listed, all that stuff.
Exactly. And, you're going to have a package. Typically, the bank's going to want a letter of explanation. Why are you, from the seller, from the homeowner, what's going on. They want to know that. They just want 2 or 3 paragraphs letting them know. One of the things that we include in all the packages that go to the bank, and the bank collects it, who's going to collect it at the bank is a loss mitigator. The loss mitigator collects it. They're assigned it. And we always include from our agent a broker price opinion. And that broker price opinion is just their opinion of what the value of the property is so that they can support what offer we are putting in on the table. So that's what happens at that point once it gets submitted. There's paperwork in between. It's nothing complicated for the homeowner to give. It's basically, tax returns, pay stubs, if they have any, Social Security stuff, anything that could support, what's going on. We get all that information. It's got to be sent over to the bank, all that good stuff. And that's why we submit a BPO with all of our offers. Because that's really, really important.
So here's where I'm having trouble today, and you may have had trouble too, because I know you said you're not doing a ton of these right now, but you are still doing them successfully. Where we get into trouble is we've done everything you just said, and then the appraisal comes in $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 above what we offered, and the bank says no way.
Yeah, and the thing with that is, most of the time, the appraiser has no idea. So they're going to come in at highest and best because they feel like maybe somebody's trying to get like a refinance done. They're trying to get a loan done, but they don't know the situation. So I think sometimes that might be able to help too, because they'll probably try and get highest and best comps. And what they really need to do is get as-is values, because that does play a significant role.
Yeah.
If you're getting highest and best comps, and this house has been sitting vacant, maybe it's not in the best condition as one of those highest and best comps, that's not really a comp in my opinion. And if the individual is going outside of a certain area, a certain radius from the subject property, that's also going to be a concern for a higher value as well. So that's why it's really important to have somebody meet that person out there to kind of let them know what's going on. Because then they could at least start looking at as-is values and not highest and best comps.
Got it. So, Jason, we're kind of up against the clock. We got just a few more minutes. I really want you to touch on, before we go, the Indianapolis market as a whole, kind of the greater Indianapolis area. I hear people saying it's a cash flowing market. Give me some numbers. Give me just what's going on there. You said we're in a hot market still. Anything flattening out there? Just give us a synopsis in about 3 minutes, the Indianapolis, Indiana market.
So Indianapolis, the Marion County area, we're seeing still steady growth as far as individuals from all over the country. Some parts of, different parts of the world are investing here. We're getting strong capitalization rates in our properties. We are definitely a cash flow market versus an appreciation market. We're seeing anywhere between single-family residences are seeing anywhere between a 12 to 18% cap rate in certain areas. Jeez. Some places are seeing low 20%. Multifamily is also extremely strong here. We're starting to see more job growth as well. There's a lot of stuff that's happening here. Especially downtown, and then also the surrounding suburbs as well. We're having a lot of huge companies come in here, startup companies, tech companies, and we're seeing some really great growth within the economy here of Indianapolis. And I've been seeing rent increasing from last year. It has increased, not a huge amount, but by 1.5%, which is good in my opinion. And I'm also seeing a really great stat is most people, when they are listing properties, they're getting about 98.5% of what the list price is of their homes. Average list time is also right around 43, 44 days. So it's a very fast market here. When something hot comes on, it's typically gone really fast.
Any signs of slowdown? Any signs of flattening out?
As of right now, from a market correction, Indianapolis, even when we had the 2008 crash, we may have saw like 0.5% to maybe a full percent in depreciation. But I don't see that happening this time around. I see us, if we are leveling off, I do see times to where, listings are going to stay a little bit more. I do see buyers starting to not pull away, but not get approved for loans as much because of the Fed interest rate hikes. And I do believe they already said it's going to continue into next year as well. for each quarter. So I think it's going to go up anywhere between an eighth of a percent to a 1/4% each time, which could cause individuals not being able to buy as much. So I do see the rental market increasing here.
Jason Lucchesi, Indianapolis, Indiana. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and giving us a really good and thorough breakdown of short sales that we have definitely not talked about on this show at all. And thank you for talking about the Indianapolis market. We appreciate that. How can people get a hold of you if they want to reach out to you, and maybe if they're in the area? How can people get a hold of you?
So yeah, if folks want to reach out to me, I've got my website, jasonluchesi.com, and my last name. I know it's kind of a hard one to pronounce, but it's Jason, JASON, LUCCHESI.com. Feel free to reach out to us. I've got my book on there if you want it for free.
Awesome.
I've also got a ton of free resources on there too, and our podcast, No Flipping Excuses, is on there too.
I was about to say that. The No Flipping Excuse. I love that title. No Flipping Excuses podcast, which I got to come on. So we're gonna link that up when it comes out. And we'll put everything in the show notes. JasonLuchesi.com. Thank you for the free book. Thank you for all the free resources. Guys, definitely go check that out. Jason, thank you again for coming on the show. Guys, subscribe. Hit the subscribe button right now. You won't believe the guests we have lined up to come on this show. So you got to get subscribed. Make sure you're getting alerts for when our new shows are coming out. We love you so much, and we will see you next time.